exactly brings us to the first question in your email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Bud. What negative trends do we need to focus on to get our teams to high performance?
Well, there's a few trends. We always talk about high performance and talk about some characteristics. One of the characteristics is clarity of purpose and clarity of communication. But there's another trend that I notice a lot in the teams we're working with, and that is the unclarity of leadership, because leadership is constantly shifting, right? Leaders moving in and out, causing resets, reorganizations, and ongoing uncertainty about, okay, so what's the new leadership about? And so you get unclarity, and that unclarity breaks the performance cycles for many teams. It puts them into sort of a let's wait and see mode.
Right.
And so it's one of the trends that worries me a lot, actually, because I think I've seen it in pretty much everyone I've been coaching over the last year. The moment a new manager or a new director steps in, or even a new executive, you get this uncertainty.
Yeah, and in the last couple of years, in the post-COVID era, there seems to be just a continuing change of leadership all the time. Like, it's just
like musical chairs. It's like, they barely get a chance to get settled, and they're moving on again. So I find that a little bit disconcerting, a little bit worrying.
Does it contribute to people's stress with the constant change?
Well, that's so. And the other part that comes in is that the stress was high during COVID, and people coped because they felt it had an immediate need and urgency to it. Many people now say the stress hasn't gone down, right? We're not stepping back down to normal. And so you get two stresses. You get the constant change and uncertainty about what's the direction, on top of a never-ending workload that's actually just above what we can handle.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And
I guess
one of the things I mentioned very much in our high performance material is you need a cadence, including breaks and celebrations. Well, where are the breaks? Where are the celebrations?
Yeah, as it's something that we just don't have time for anymore, right? And that's taking away the purpose of doing things, is to actually see the benefits. Yeah.
And so, I think there's too much stress going on that level. And in terms of change, I think people do not have a chance to absorb and own the purpose of the change. They don't feel that there's a real purpose to it. It all feels like change for change's sake. And they can't rally behind a leader that they trust, because the leader comes and goes. So all in all, I think we're in a bit of a troubled state there.
Yeah. What are the other big challenges that teams are facing at the moment?
Yeah, I think on top of all the other uncertainties, of course, there's this looming AI thing that people have to come to terms with, and it's probably pretty high in the hype cycle. And if you think of Gartner's hype cycle, we're in the overinflated expectations, definitely.
Yeah.
But everybody is talking about it, and everybody feels the pressure of, okay, how is this going to change my work? Should I be on top of it? Should I be using it or promoting it even? So there's that. There's this thing. But I guess in general, and this is global, by the way, because I see it everywhere, is there is a crisis in the healthcare environment, right? The healthcare is in crisis everywhere. And it's partially because we've let the costs spiral up out of control, but it's also because we've tried to privatize parts of healthcare that apparently do not privatize very well.
Sure.
Yeah.
With healthcare is a runaway train of cost at the moment, and we can't build enough hospitals, we can't build enough systems, and we can't train enough clinicians to provide all the services we need. So we do have,
and the market itself is not a good mechanism to organize this. I think we should actually be honest and conclude that we've left too much to the market. So, for instance, here in Europe, they were closing hospitals because they weren't profitable just before COVID hit, and then realized we don't have the capacity to put up with all these people coming in. So there you go. All of a sudden, we don't have enough beds.
Yeah.
That's just one example, but we have more of those examples. Plus that, you can get really, really expensive niche treatments, but not have enough money to do more common treatments for more people.
Yeah, it's going to become a two-speed economy for healthcare, that's for sure. And the last thing we want to see is a privatized healthcare sector and have the types of pressures that the US exhibits.
Sure. And so I think that's a big challenge, especially for the countries that still have, let's say, a socially organized healthcare system, is that how do we defend that system against the pressures of commercialization and the pressures of privatization? How do we show basically that we can do better? Yeah. And that's for everyone in the public sector. I guess that's a real challenge. I mean, show that you can do better. And I think we can, but we shouldn't take it for granted, because it could all be taken away.
I guess, what can we do to create an environment where people love to work in the healthcare system?
Now that's a good question, and funnily enough, I think the answer lies hidden in the people themselves. I've always said that you find a lot of cynical, sort of disengaged people in the public sector, but it is, why are they cynical and why are they disengaged? It's because at heart they're actually still idealists. Right. I find the percentage of fundamentally idealistic people in the public sector actually higher than in the private sector, where you have a lot of people that openly say, well, I'm just here for the money. Whereas in the public sector, a lot of people start there with the idea, well, I'm going to do something good for the community, for the country, for the state. And then they get cynical because it turns out to be so bloody hard to do that. Right? Because of politics, because of money constraints, because of all sorts of exposure, especially the press is always on your case. Make one mistake and you're on the front page of the Courier Mail. So it's really hard to stick to that idealism, but it's still there. Yeah.
Okay. How can we nurture it so that people feel better about themselves? I mean, they're doing a great job and they're doing it for the right reasons, but we've just battered them down into.
We made it really hard for them. Exactly.
How can we backtrack that at a even at a team level?
Well, for one thing, is we should talk more often about that underlying purpose, that real purpose, the real reason we're here. And so we should talk about the lives we're saving, the patient experience we're improving, basically all the good things that you want from a healthcare system that you, at any level, wherever you work in that system, are contributing to. And I find that when people get back to that story of this is what we're really doing it for, then you tap back into that underlying idealism and that sense of purpose. So that's one thing. The other thing, and that is a general issue, is we need to keep working on the safety, the mostly psychological safety of people on a team level, which includes the safety to challenge things, right? To ask the difficult questions, to not accept the obvious answers, but say, is this really true? Are we doing the right thing? And the more difficult one even is we should let people make mistakes.
Yeah.
And then not crucify them on the front page of the Courier Mail, but actually celebrate them for it. Say, well, you had the guts to try something. Okay, next time do better, but congratulations.
Yeah.
You've learned something.
Yeah. Fail fast has not been something that's been, rewarded in the public sector for sure.
No. So that safety to experiment and to fail in a safe way, and here's the problem, of course, in healthcare especially, but basically other sectors have a similar issue. But failures need to be contained so that it doesn't actually kill anyone.
Yeah.
Right. So there is this safety net around it, but which basically means you should give people more space to experiment in, let's say, sandbox environments, and not always be on the real work, but also be on the, let's call it the training work, the experimentation work, the playing around with stuff. That's one side that I really think is underestimated. If people are always only doing really, really important and essential work, they get stuck there, and it's a constant pressure, but they also don't get a chance to learn new things.
Yep.
And to find out other things they're good at.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
one last thing, by the way, is the love of work. I think, and this is a book I'm working on that I'm writing at the moment, is if you let people, if you get off their case a bit, give them a bit more freedom, a bit more autonomy, but also a bit more purpose, most people will actually love work more than not work, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's rewarding, and you're doing something that's important. And if you're getting the feedback in your environment, and if people around you are also experiencing that, it can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah. So it's almost natural for people to like work, and then we put up all sorts of systems to make them dislike it. So I would say stop working so hard at making work horrible, and you'll see that work is actually quite enjoyable on its own.
Yeah. I guess the concept of slow down to speed up kind of always, reminds me of that kind of scenario. I meet a lot of people who are working a lot of hours. They've got bandwidth problems. They can't improve their process to help themselves long term because they're so in the moment. And we need to do that better. And that kind of leads me to one reasonably kind of controversial question. Is do we need people to return to the office to get that happiness back into their work? Because people have never been so unhappy at work, according to Gallup surveys. What do you think?
Well, the answer is yes and no. In the sense that we do need people to get together, but not the whole time. We need to learn to be flexible in this, and see that. So the hybrid way of working has always been my favorite, because you have different people with different needs, and not everybody can actually work efficiently if they're in an office environment, because there's a lot of distractions and disturbances. But there's also a lot of people that cannot work alone all the time because they just get lost, right? They lose the connection, they lose the communication. So I guess to serve everyone as best as possible, a kind of a hybrid is probably the most promising one. But one of the core things that all teams need is they need regular touch points that are more than just content.
Right.
They need a social cohesion that you can only get by occasionally coming together.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be too often, actually. It does. I'm not talking about weekly or monthly even, but a minimum of once a year for remote working teams has proven to be incredibly invigorating and revitalizing for teams. But I would say if you live in the same state, for instance, a few times a year, at least get together and be social.
Yeah.
Now, for different types of work, you may want to step up that frequency.
Yeah.
If you want to be creative, so you're facing a new challenge and you need to really come to terms with what's the challenge and how shall we tackle that, maybe remote is not the best way of doing that. There's a lot of evidence that shows that being creative as a team with remote workers is actually harder than if you're in the same room.
Yes, I agree. And I've seen that. But what I also see is people being forced into the office and people resenting it.
And that's
and
not working.
They're coming up with excuses why it doesn't work.
But I've always found this interesting in the sense that very often when I was forced to come to the office, I would find that the time in the office was mostly wasted time.
Yeah.
Right. With a little bit of socializing, and maybe 10 minutes of useful information exchange. And the rest of the time, I would be far better off on my own, getting work done.
Yeah.
If I chose times to go into the office, it would usually be to get a few people together and do something purposeful.
Right.
Not just be there.
Yeah.
Just be in the office is stupid. It's counterproductive.
Yeah.
So the art will be, how do we get people to come to the office in a way that makes the office feel as a special place, that we really have a reason to be there?
Yep.
And I have some people that have a hybrid mode and say, yeah, look, if I come to the office maybe once or twice a week for half a day, that's the time that I meet up with people. I reestablish contact. We check up, and then we do some creative thinking. The rest of the time, I'll choose when I come to the office or not.
Yeah.
And they find that a really good mode. So it's not that they then can't come to the office. It's actually, okay, the rest of the week, it's their choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's still a work in progress. Finding the balance right is different for different types of roles. And a matter of experimentation is needed for sure.
Yeah. And there's one thing we don't have much control over, but that does play a role, and that is the kind of social network they have outside their work. So, you and I worked at Gartner. I didn't meet my team actually for the first, I think, almost 3 years that I worked for Gartner. I didn't meet any of them.
Right.
But it was okay for me because I had a pretty solid social network. So I wasn't short of real human contact.
Yeah.
But there are people out there that get really, really lonely if they don't have to come into the office. And you just lose them.
Yeah, and I think they lose themselves a little too, right?
Yeah. They lose themselves. They get sort of cocooned into this little study they're in, and they live in a virtual world, and that's not nurturing. It's hard to sustain life in a virtual world.
Yeah. Just pivoting onto a different topic.
Yeah.
So a lot of, you're very familiar with driving charters, teams with charters.
Yeah.
Do teams need a documented charter?
Again, I'm beginning to sound like a consultant. The answer is yes and no. What I found about the whole charter is that more than the document, they need the process.
Yeah.
The document is nice to have, and it's actually good to have a document so that you know what you're working on, and you have a sort of a focal point so that everybody understands, okay, this is what we're putting together. But what the process does, it brings up all the assumptions, all the questions, all the uncertainties, but also the motivation, the drive, the purpose, maybe context. And if you have not done that at least once, then most of these things are assumed. And we all know what assumptions do, right?
Yeah. What would you recommend is a good frequency for people to revisit their charter?
I would say twice a year. Once just to check, right? So do we still believe this? Is it still okay? Are there any questions, doubts, changes? And the other one is probably best at the start of a new year or a new cycle. It depends on when you start your cycles, and say, let's go back to the charter and refresh it.
Yeah. If you were a new leader coming in to a team that already had an existing charter, what would be your sort of recommended course of action? Would you sort of stop and say, let's do another one, or would you just let it flow until you get a kind of, get your feet under the table and revisit what
I would start? No, I would start with asking the team to explain the charter to me. So treat me like a new member of the team and read me in.
Yeah. I think that's an important point. And I think if a leader joins a team, that's probably what people think of doing, because leaders sort of ask people to explain what the team's all about. But when we bring in junior members of the team, we don't always think about those same processes.
Yeah, we should do the same thing. You got a new team member coming in. So this is the team. This is us. This is our charter. Let's have a chat about that. Does it ring a bell? Does it mean anything to you? Does it resonate? Yeah.
I mean, what better process could you have in onboarding than giving somebody a fresh charter that they can just absorb all of that kind of norms and goals and desires for the team and go, oh, okay, now I'm up to speed versus what a lot of teams traditionally have done, which is sort of allow that sort of person to work it out for themselves over the sort of coming months until they start asking their own questions.
Yeah, well, it can take up to a year sometimes for people to figure out what the team is all about. I mean, and this is not as uncommon as it sounds. And I have talked to too many people that after more than 6 months, more than 9 months even, still walk around with questions about, but what are we here for actually? What's going on? Yeah, so...
And I think if you have 2 or 3 members in a year change in a team of, say, 10, you've got enough people that are new that, maybe the charter doesn't reflect everybody now. Because, they've got different experience, they've got different goals, they've got maybe expectation differences. I think that's very, very sound.
So to go back to my original answer, from that perspective, you need some kind of documented charter to go back to. But never forget that the document itself should only be an excuse to do the process, or a little bit of a guide to do the process with. But it's never about the document alone. I mean, don't think you're done when you have the document on the shelf. That's the thing I actually want to emphasize. On the shelf, the document is worth nothing.
I think the last step in doing a charter should be putting the calendar item in for the review in 6 months.
Exactly.
That's something actually I might remember that and pass on to some.
Make a point of that.
Okay. Last question. We've talked a lot about changes in leadership. How important is the selection process for leaders to keep a team successful? Selection processes can be very...
Do you mean leaders selecting team members?
No, I mean senior leaders selecting leaders.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, we see it a lot, right? And do we really apply the right principles in order to serve the team or build some other kind of grand leadership plan?
Well, we're going a little bit deep here. I'm always careful not to well, maybe I should go really deep on this one. Is that we have an issue with...
Don't tell me I've stumped you.
We haven't... no, you haven't stumped me. We have a real issue with leadership. And the question is, can we solve that now in this conversation, or do we stay at a slightly higher level? The real issue with leadership that I see all the time is, what gives those people the right to call themselves leaders to begin with? Right? Just the fact that you have a title doesn't make you a leader.
True.
So one thing that I find missing about the whole selection process is we're constantly looking at qualifications and experience, but the real process of becoming a leader of a team has not ended by you being appointed. It has just started by you being appointed. So the appointment means nothing in itself. It's when then to do the hard work of earning the trust of the team, earning your leadership, and earning their followership. And so the selection process I find almost less important than the induction process, where the leader proves to the team that he or she is worth the title of leader.
I like that. That's a nice way to put it.
That's one thing. But okay, let's put that aside for the moment, because that's probably a deeper problem to solve, because we're not used to doing that, right? You appoint a leader, he or she is the leader. Now go and work. Where's the induction? Where's the getting the assimilation and earning the followership? But in terms of the selection process, I think one of the big things missing there is there's usually no active part on the team in the selection process.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a missing piece.
Yeah, people quite often have peer review or peer input, but they hardly ever have team input. I think that is
I
maybe,
haven't seen it much. I haven't seen it at all.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, Bard.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure to talk about all things around teams and performance. And looking forward to our next chat.
Same here. Always happy to explore these issues. They matter. They are important.
See you soon.